Always good to have everybody. We'll start the way we do regularly, and that is I want to welcome our different campuses. So our Kenosha campus, Racine campus, our online campus, and of course our Weekends on Wednesday campus. We welcome all of you. If you've never been to Weekends on Wednesday, you've got to join us sometime. We have a lot of fun around here. So here's the deal. We're going to jump right in. We are in week 4 of this series we started a couple weeks ago called Relationship Restart. And even though we're focusing on married relationships and dating relationships, I know that the principles we're talking about can actually be applied to the different relationships we have in our life, parenting and coworkers and friends and acquaintances, and I hope you're finding ways to do that. I, every week, see tons of single people show up in this series, and I just want to say, wow, I'm proud of you. I'm proud of everybody just for making this a priority. And if you've missed out on any of the past weeks, let me summarize it for you. Week 1. We talked about the biggest threat to any relationship is a word called drift. If we drift relationally, if we drift recreationally, where we're not having much fun with each other anymore, if we drift intellectually, we're not having stimulating conversations, if we drift physically and we're not showing affection to each other, if we drift spiritually and we're not on the same page maybe spiritually like we used to be, what happens is eventually we get to a point where we wake up and we say, I think I married the wrong person. I don't feel like I know this person anymore. They're so different than me, and that's a dangerous place to be. So in week 1, we talked about how to put down anchors in our relationship. Week 2, we talked about how to win at conflict without losing at love. How to win at conflict without losing at love. And basically what we said, whenever a conflict arises, whenever there's a tension or a problem, just remember that's the enemy. You and your spouse are not enemies. You are one, and if you work together as a team, you can defeat the enemy, or even if you don't completely defeat and eradicate the enemy, the truth is what you're able to do is you're able to be on the same page and move forward in your relationship, and ultimately that's what matters. And then last week in week 3, we talked about the crazy cycle, this revolving door of frustration that all of us find ourselves in at some point in our relationship. Maybe you're in that relationship now, that season now where you're just like, I'm in this crazy cycle and I can't get off. And so the way to do it, as we said, is you have to learn to meet the needs of your partner. And there's certainly different needs that they have, but the primary need for most women is the need to feel loved. The primary need for most men is to feel, does anybody remember? Respect. Woo! You guys are doing really, really good. So today, the topic is sex. And to get us in, whoa, yeah, that's another, right? And to get us in the mood, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a little line from a love song, and then you tell me what song it is. And before I do that, I'm going to put my phone on silent so nobody calls me. All right, so here we go. Take my hand, take my whole life too. What song? Yeah, that is absolutely right. Here we go. Can't Help Falling in Love by our dear friend Elvis Presley. All right, here we go. Song number 2. I know it's not much, but it's the best I can do. Does anybody know? All right, here's a hint from Elton John. Oh, there we go. Your Song. Okay, that's the line came right out of that song. Here we go. This is just a line out of the next song. Girl, you know I want your love. Your love was handmade for somebody like me. Anybody know the song? It is Ed Sheeran. That is absolutely correct. And it's his song, Shape of You. All right, so you're doing pretty good. I'm hoping that our other campuses have much more understanding of culture than our Weekends on Wednesday. All right, here we go. Number 4. Hey, you better get this one. Bittersweet Memories. That's all I'm taking with me. Bittersweet Memories. That's all I'm taking with me. Here we go. Whitney Houston, I Will Always Love You. Yes, we're taking little obscure phrases from the song, so I didn't want them to be too easy. Here's a final one for you. I'll hold you tight, baby, all through the night. Yeah, Boys to Men, I'll make love to you. All right, there you go. A little bit of Boys to Men. So today, dealing with this topic of sex, and I'm very aware, lots of different beliefs and emotions and opinions on this topic, so I got to be super careful in how I present everything. But I think you know this. My job as a pastor is to take time during the week to study a library of books that we call the Bible And then on whatever topic we're discussing, to, in a very compelling way and as honestly as I can, to be true to what the scriptures teach, just tell you, hey, this is what the scriptures teach. This is kind of God's heart on this topic. And for those of you who are saying, man, I want to move forward in my spiritual journey, then you have to wrestle through, what is your next step? Now, I want to say this. I say this all the time, but I want to say this specifically with this topic and what we're dealing with today. You don't have to agree with anything that I teach. You don't even have to agree with what the scriptures say on this topic to attend this church. Okay, you're totally welcome. You're totally invited. We love having you here. This is something, though, that all of us just have to wrestle with as we are in our journey with Jesus. Now, a few years ago, a guy showed up to the Antiques Roadshow with a blanket that he had used and possessed for most of his life. And at the roadshow, what he learned about his blanket is that it was something called a Ute wearing blanket. It was Navajo made, and it was worn by Ute chiefs. Okay, so it's very fascinating, this blanket that he had possessed for a while. And so what I want to do is I'll take about 90 seconds and show you a clip of this guy, Ted, learning about his blanket.
This is Navajo weaving in its purest form. All of these things that we see later with diamonds and all kinds of different patterns comes much later than this. This is just pure linear design. This is the beginning of Navajo weaving.
Wow.
And not only that, the condition of this is unbelievable. Unbelievable. Wow. We see these, we've got a little bit of damage over there.
We have a damage.
Very interesting thing here. This is almost like silk. It's made from hand-woven wool, but it's so finely done, it's like silk. Wow. It would repel water. And this here is dyed with indigo dyes. It was a very valuable dye at the time. And what's really interesting is right here, we have an old repair that was probably done in the 1860s. And it's done with raveled bayeta, which is in itself a very important thing in Navajo weaving. So all involved. It's an extraordinary piece of art. It's extremely rare. It is the most important thing that's come into the roadshow that I've seen. Do you have a sense at all of what we're looking at here in terms of value?
I haven't a clue.
Are you a wealthy man, Ted?
No.
Well, sir, I'm still a little nervous here, I have to tell you. On a really bad day, this textile would be worth $350,000. On a good day, it's about $500,000.
Oh, my God.
And you had no idea.
I had no idea. I was just laying on the back of a chair.
Well, sir, you have a national treasure.
Wow.
A national treasure.
All right, these are fun stories to watch, right? Ted is holding on to this icon, Native American piece of art and doesn't even know it. It's the crown jewel, right? There, 50 of these blankets exist in total here in the United States. It's fine quality, it's unique, it's rare, it's between 150 and 200 years old. Just amazing. And I hope you know this. But as much quality as that blanket has and is made of, and as rare and unique as it is, and as beautiful as it is, you are much more valuable to God than that blanket. This is why King David, as he reflected on the complexity of the human body, writes these words. He says, "You made all the delicate inner parts of my body and knit me together in my mother's womb. Thank you for making me so wonderfully complex." Your body has value. Now, it may not be the same as my wonderland that I carry around with me every day, right? But your body has value. And because your body has value, and because my body has value, what we do with our body matters. Now, this is where most of us start to feel a little bit tense, right? Because this is my life, and this is my body, which means I can do with my body whatever I want to do. I can eat whatever I want to eat. Hey, it's my mouth. I can say whatever I want to say. I can smoke whatever I want to smoke. I can sleep with whoever I want to sleep with. And that's absolutely true. You absolutely can do whatever you want to with your body. Just like Ted can take his Ute blanket worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, and he can cut it up into little pieces if he wants. It's totally his prerogative, totally his choice. But it's not wise. I think the reason that most of us don't really think much about what we do with our bodies, how we take care of it, what we eat, who we sleep with, is because our perspective of the body is really, really limited. All right, and so if the big picture of our body were into some sort of puzzle, we would have just a tiny puzzle piece of truly understanding our body and all the different aspects of it. It's impossible to fully understand it. This is especially true in the area of sex. Right? When it comes to sex, it's hard to be self-aware of this and it's hard to embrace this and realize this, but our perspective is very limited and it's very incomplete. This is why when it comes to the topic of sex, most people tend to see sex in one of two ways. All right? One group, and it's a small group, when they look at sex, they say it's dirty, nasty, and gross. So save it for the one you love. Right? That's their view of sex. And there are people who have that view and they consider it as a way of, basically a way of making babies. Right? For those who see sex as gross, this is the kind of card they would give to their spouse on Valentine's Day. Would you be my necessary vessel of procreation and nothing more? All right? Let's keep this real innocent here. And that's a small group of people who think that way. Well, there is a large group of people, very large group of people who see sex differently. Their perspective, way more popular, would be, hey, they would never phrase it like this, but they see sex as God. Right? And this is why we place such a high priority on sex. This is why it's easy to find value in who we're sleeping with and how much attention they're giving us. This is why it's easy to place value in how many people we're sleeping with. And so every time that I have a one-night stand, every time that I have a hookup, every time that I have some sort of sexual experience, man, I feel more complete. I feel like I'm loved more because this person or these people gave me special attention. But here's the deal. God sees sex way differently than that. Right? God's perspective is way bigger than a puzzle piece. What God sees is how that night or how that event or how that particular relationship connects to the bigger puzzle and the bigger picture of our life. And so if you wonder, well, does God care who I sleep with? The answer is yes. And I know that's irritating. But if we're honest, most of us care about who people sleep with, right? We care about who politicians sleep with and who celebrities sleep with. This is why we have so many tabloid magazines. It's why we have TMZ. And even if you're a little self-righteous and you say, I honestly don't care who people sleep with, it's just not true. Because I could just tell you right now, if I were to say, hey, I have been sleeping with someone for the last several months who I'm not married to, it would bother you. And it should bother you if that were the case. So God does care about our sex life because he sees how it connects to the bigger picture of our life. Now, in the first century, the city of Corinth was obsessed with sex. Okay, it was a topic that just everywhere you went, sex, sex, sex. There were prostitutes everywhere. I mean, it was just indulged, the culture was, with sex and sexuality. And so the Apostle Paul in the first century writes a letter to Christians, followers of Jesus living in Corinth, and he talks about sex. And at the end of his statements on sex, here's how he summarizes his thoughts. He says, you must honor God with your body. If you are a follower of Jesus, you must honor God with your body. Now, there's lots of implications on what that verse means, and we could take literally weeks to talk about what does it look like to honor God with our body. And so all I want to do today is talk about what it looks like to honor God with our sexuality, just a portion of how he's made us. And the best way to honor God with our sex or our sexuality is to use it for the purpose it was intended. Right? When I was married 22 years ago, my wife gave me this ring. I was going to take it off just now, but I realized I didn't practice that, so that's not coming off. But if I were to be able to get it off, and I were to take it and put it underneath my kitchen table that maybe isn't fully level, and I were to use it to kind of level out the table, you'd say, that's kind of disrespectful to your wife who gave you that ring. I mean, that ring has some value, and it's got some purpose, and it's not using it for the purpose. So if we're to honor God with our body and honor God in our sexuality, we're to use it for the purpose it was created. And sex wasn't created to be gross, and it wasn't created to be God. Sex was created to be a gift. And that's what it is to all of us. It's a gift. Now, it's a gift he gave animals, it's a gift he gave fish, it's a gift he gave insects, but within those categories, mostly it's for reproduction. Within humans, it serves a way bigger gift than just reproduction. It's a gift of pleasure. It's a gift of closeness and intimacy. It's a gift of fun. It's a gift of feeling like one. It's a gift of comfort at times. Lots of different dimensions to it. And so I want to talk very candidly about how to have great sex. And since this is the reason I know you showed up today, and those of you who are watching online, you were too afraid to show up, but you're watching online and you're taking notes, right? Everybody get out your pens, get out your note sheets. I want you taking notes, writing lots of stuff down. If you're single, take extra amount of notes, right? I'm going to try to speak as candidly to you as possible. But at the end of the day, great sex includes heart, mind, soul, and body. Heart, mind, soul, and body. So here we go. Number one, let's hit it. Heart. Let's talk about the heart. The heart is all about connection. Now, we've spent the last 3 weeks talking about how to have connection, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. If you want great sex, you need to be aware of the needs of your partner and try to be meeting those needs so that connection's happening. If you want great sex, you need to be working regularly to try to be a team. You need to be working on how to show love to each other and respect to each other. You need to be learning how to speak each other's love language. Now, this is a concept I'm thinking most of us are familiar with, but if you're not, you can go to 5lovelanguages.com. 5lovelanguages.com. There are a summary of the 5 different love languages there are. Great principles talked about in the book 5 Love Languages, but they're summarized there, and you can actually take a free test to figure out what your love language is if you don't know it offhand. The bottom line is this: great sex requires connection, because you cannot make up in the bedroom what you lack in the relationship. You cannot make up in the bedroom what you lack in the relationship. This is why I've been saying it every week. It's the big idea of the series. Love is a verb. Love requires action. It requires care. It requires compassion. It requires kindness. It requires forgiveness. And when you have that and there's connection, great sex is the result. Now, I know we have lots of jokes about sex. Billy Crystal, when it comes to sex, he says women need a reason to have sex. Men just need a place. That's true. Women need a reason to have sex. Men just need a place. Absolutely true. But here's the reality. Great sex requires more than just a place. It requires connection. The second part of great sex and the aspect of great sex includes the mind. The biggest sex organ you have is your brain. I know some of you guys, that's not true. It is, it's your brain. And if we could dissect the human brain in a way that all of us could understand, here's what it would look like. For the guys, okay, generally speaking, men's brains are waffles. It's compartmentalized. Guys have an amazing ability to compartmentalize their life. So when guys are working, they're focused on work. When guys are golfing, they're focused on golf. When they're hanging out with their friends, it's all about their friends. Guys have a compartment in their brain that is absolutely for nothing. So when you ask, what are you thinking about? What are you dreaming about? Nothing. I promise you, it's true. There's nothing in that compartment, okay? When it comes to sex, guys have a really big compartment. And the thing about guys is they can jump very quickly from compartment to compartment. It's not all connected to them. It's just boom, boom, boom. That's why they can be ticked off. They can be going off at you in a fight and then look up and, whoa, you're naked. Whoa, I'm sorry. I'm ready, I'm good, right? They're just able to get past it, no big deal. It's also why almost every guy I know has an amazing gift. They can sexualize any comment. Honey, can you please pick up some bread? Oh, I got some bread for you right here. Honey, would you mind getting the oil change? Hey, girl, I'll change your oil right now. Right? They just have this amazing ability. Hey, can you put some butter on my biscuit? Oh, I'll put some butter on your biscuit, all right. Right? Guys just have this amazing ability. And again, they compartmentalize their life. Ladies have brains like spaghetti, okay? And what I mean by that is everything's connected. Physical, emotional, spiritual, everything is connected. Which is why you can be in a very intimate sex act and you can be kissing passionately like out of the movies, and she can push you back and say, did you remember to take out the trash? You're like, what? Where did that come from? It's because everything's connected. It's also the reason you can say something to her in the morning, not think much about it, and it can affect her all day long. Maybe in this series, maybe you've been working your best to have a great relationship. And I'm proud of you for taking those steps. And maybe you're frustrated because you say, man, I've been doing everything I can to connect with my wife, to honor her, to show her love, to speak her language, all this stuff. And it's just very little progress is just being made. Just remember, sex is not a transaction. You can't make up in 3 weeks what maybe took you 3 years to get into. And again, it's because of how the different wiring of our brains look. Men's brains look like waffles, women's brains like spaghetti, generally speaking. Some ladies may think, well, this is interesting because when it comes to sex, my husband's not really into sex. And my question would be, are you into your husband? Do you respect him? Do you try to connect with him? Do you try to have that closeness with him? Or maybe you're a dude and you say, my wife's not into sex. My question back is, are you into her? Oh, I'm into her, all right. No, are you into her? Are you honoring her and respecting her? Our brains are the biggest sex organs we have. And the reason I say that is because what we believe about sex, how we think about sex, affects our attitudes. It affects our actions regarding it. So if you grew up in a home where it was kind of hush-hush and nobody really talked about it, it wasn't a bad thing, but it was just something that everybody was silent on, then for you, man, sex was a mystery. You had to kind of figure it out. Or maybe you grew up in a home where there was a lot of pain associated with sex. There was infidelity. There was sexual abuse. There were different addictions that affected the family. For most of us, our view of sex has been shaped by our friends. It's been shaped by social media. It's been shaped by reality TV shows, romantic movies, love novels that we read. And so it's very easy when it comes to sex. We just have these huge expectations. We think every night ought to be fireworks. And I'm telling you, if that becomes our expectation, it's going to lead to a lot of disappointment. And it's going to affect our sex life. Since sex begins in the mind, we would be wise to protect our mind. To just guard it and say, what am I allowing into my mind? Most of the messages we're bombarded with sexualize other people, especially women. There are endless advertisements featuring women who basically say, take me, use me, do whatever you want to with me, and when you're done, just trade me in for someone else. That's called a commodity. And most of the stand-up comedy available and the top songs on the radio, quite honestly, are ones that demean women and refer to women as bitches and hoes. It's completely degrading. And this is what rape culture is built on, and it's something we become completely desensitized to. Now, I mentioned earlier, the Apostle Paul lives in a culture, lives in a society where people are obsessed with sex. And so he writes a letter to followers of Jesus in the first century living in Corinth. And in one of those chapters, he focuses on what love looks like and what intimacy looks like. And if you are married, it's likely you had a little bit of his letter read at your wedding. 1 Corinthians 13, love is patient, love is kind, love is not jealous or boastful or proud or rude. Well, at the end of his chapter on love, Paul summarizes his thoughts on love with these words. He says, when I was a child, I spoke and thought and reasoned as a child. But when I grew up, I put away childish things. One of the biggest areas of our life in which we need to grow up in is in the area of sex. One of the biggest areas we lack maturity is the area of sex, right? For us, all we see is this little puzzle piece. And so we're all about the hookup. We're all about the moment. We're all about the experience. And again, our childish thinking is like, it should always be fireworks. And if it's not, I'm moving on to the next person. No. If you are in a long-term committed relationship, let me tell you, there are different experiences of sex that you will have within that relationship. Right? If you were to just to kind of compare it to meals, at some level you have home-cooked meals, right? She's wearing the face mask and the night guard is in. Just a little home-cooked action going on, right? And then you got the fast food. Some of you know exactly what I'm talking about there, a little quickie, right? Then you got fine dining, where it's more of an experience, and there's romance and rose petals, and it's just have a very grown-up version of what sex looks like and feels like. Otherwise, you're going to compare everything to whatever you learned on social media, whatever you heard from your friends, and whatever we saw in the movies. If you're a follower of Jesus, grow up. And part of growing up means I have the obligation to treat every person I see as someone made in the image of God, by the way I think about them, talk about them, and treat them. You want great sex? It includes the heart, it includes the mind, and it also includes the soul. There's a spiritual connection taking place, right? There's closeness, there's intimacy. You want great sex? You got to get to the point where you do feel like soulmates. Because great sex happens when both people have confidence with each other and they feel freedom with each other, where they feel passionate and they're fearless. No fear of being compared, no fear of criticism, just coming together as two individuals into one. And if you want to know how to have that kind of connection, that kind of closeness, and that kind of intimacy, it happens through a little word called exclusivity. And since I'm not going to throw it on the screen, you get to figure out how to spell it. Exclusivity. And the reason I say this is it's difficult, incredibly difficult, to be intimate and close to someone who's having sex with other people. Right? That doesn't lead to intimacy. That doesn't lead to being soulmates. It's very difficult to be intimate with someone who's always comparing you to some person that they saw in some sex video or they saw in some airbrushed image, an individual maybe they've never even met. Right? That's not exclusivity. That doesn't lead to intimacy and being close. Now, I know when it comes to pornography, we're all kind of be all over the map. Right? Everybody's going to have different views, and we could probably even argue. Some I've heard try to argue from Scripture why it's okay to fill our mind with pornographic images, and I'm not even going to use a bunch of Scripture to try to debate this. All I'm going to say is this, as a pastor and as a follower of Jesus, I, in my life, because even prior to following, to being a pastor, just have made a decision. I'm not going to fill my mind with those things. It's addictive. It puts Rindy in a position. It puts women in a position where, quite honestly, they can't live up to, the images or the videos, because my wife's not an acrobat, right? So you can't do all the things, whatever's in the videos. And so I've done my best. I'm not saying I've never looked. I'm not saying I've never struggled, right? I actually have things on my computer to safeguard me in these areas. And what I'd like us to do, everybody take a pen, and I want us to write this together, because there are going to be some of you who need this and want this. Others of you are like, I don't care, I'm not getting help for it, but I want you to write this website, xxxchurch.com. If we could all do that, just write it on there so nobody feels stupid writing, all of us writing. And for those who say, hey, I've got an addiction to porn, and man, I realize it does affect the exclusivity, it affects the intimacy and the closeness. Go to this website, and there are great resources there to help you on this. But the bottom line is we just need to be exclusive if we're going to have intimacy. Now, on another note, it's difficult to be intimate with someone who's always given the best energy to their job, or who's always having the best conversations with other people, not their spouse, who's always giving more focused attention to the TV or the computer screen than the person they're married to. They're giving more attention to their kids. It is not easy to have an exclusive relationship because there's so many things pulling us in different directions. But if you want a close and intimate and great sex life, it requires exclusivity. The more exclusive I choose to be with sex, the greater the intimacy I will experience. Because intimacy is what leads to great sex. Now, I know this idea of exclusivity sounds crazy to some of you. All right? We mock this stuff in our culture, especially when it comes to singles. This is why we have comedies about people being virgins at a certain age. Right? It's like, to us, it's a big joke that someone would choose to be exclusive when it comes to their sexuality. And so I know this. I'm out of touch, and it's going to sound like, Dave, you have no idea what it's like to be single in 2018. I get it, all right? But the Apostle Paul, I love how his words are summarized in the Message Paraphrase Bible on his thoughts on exclusivity. He says, we must not pursue the kind of sex that avoids commitment and intimacy, leaving us more lonely than ever. The kind of sex that can never become one. Okay? He says, don't pursue the kind of sex that doesn't have a oneness and an intimacy attached to it. And again, I know, Victorian age Dave here, right? Because of all the words that come to our mind when we think about sex, we think hookups, relieving stress, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. We could just have all these phrases, right? The word we wouldn't use is exclusivity. But exclusivity is what leads to great sex, and it's what allows humans to experience closeness with one another. So if you're single, I'm begging you, make this your goal. I don't care about your past. Who cares? So you've got people in your past, and you've had sex in your past, and you've had a bunch of sexual experience. Who cares? You can start at any point saying, hey, I'm going to be exclusive for the one I'm marrying. Are you going to be an anomaly? Yep. Are you going to be crazy? Yep. But lots of people who've accomplished amazing things in their life have done crazy things. People who have lots of money, they were crazy disciplined with their money. People who are great with their health, they were crazy in how they ate. Okay? You can be crazy with your body, disciplined with your body, and say, I'm going to be exclusive in my sexuality. I'm going to be for my husband, for my wife. Now, the reason great sex is exclusive sex, and the reason I'm so passionate about this, is there's way more to sex than just the physical act. Okay, this is the heart of the Me Too movement. I mean, why is it that years after a child is sexually abused and they're able to finally connect the dots of what happened to them and realize it was not right, why is it they're not just able to shake it off? Well, it's because sex is way bigger than this little picture we have of it. Why is it that rape is so much more devastating to women than being physically beat up? Why is it women will often report physical abuse to the authorities, but they'll keep this thing of rape inside of them and tell nobody their entire life? It's because sex is way bigger of an issue than this little picture we have of it. Why is it that in a marriage relationship, we don't mind sharing stories of, what we did when we were with our boyfriends or girlfriends and some of the fun things that happened when we were growing up, but we don't ever want to hear about sexual experiences that our partner had with previous boyfriends and girlfriends? Right? Sex is way bigger of a picture than what we have of it. Why is it our greatest regrets in life tend to be sexual in nature? Why is it when someone says to me, hey, Dave, I want to talk to you, and then they say, I'm going to share with you something I've never shared with any other person? I know they're not going to say, hey, I was speeding, just got to get that off my chest. No, why is it always sexual in nature? It's because sex is way bigger of a picture than we have of it with this little perspective we have. And we could say, well, those are extremes. I'm telling you, when it comes to sex, all of us, married, single, the whole gamut, I'm telling you, we all have a very limited view of it. Sexuality and sexual behavior are not just physical. They're rooted in the very deepest parts of who we are as human beings. That's why exclusivity is a big deal. If you're single, be exclusive. If you're married, be exclusive. All right, now the fourth aspect of great sex, here it is our body. All right, now male body, female body, very different from one another, right? Our brains, very different from one another. This is why there's often a lot of frustration when it comes to sex, right? There's a lot of misunderstandings, a lot of emotions in a relationship. And so I'm just going to tell you, if you want to have a great sex life, you're going to have to develop the maturity to have an honest conversation about it. And you will feel like a little kid. Every insecurity in you is going to rise to the surface if you're going to approach something about sex that you feel uncomfortable with, or you want to talk about, or you want to try. It's going to be like you're 12 years old, and you're like, hey, can we talk about it? Because, this has been on my mind. And I know it because I've had these talks. And I just feel stupid. All right? Don't like using certain words. In fact, let me just loosen all of us up, because I know how difficult something like this can be in a relationship. At the count of 3, I want everybody to say the word penis. 1, 2, 3. Oh, man. That was with a lot more energy than I would have given the Weekends on Wednesday credit for. All right? Count of 3. We're going to say breast. 1, 2, 3. Okay, I was going to say vagina, but then I felt uncomfortable, and I'm like, yeah, that's too much, right? Right? It isn't, there are words, there are topics that aren't that comfortable saying, but man, if we're going to have great sex, we have to learn how to communicate. What do we communicate? Talk about the frequency. Right? The longer a guy goes without sex, the more he needs it. Because guys have a production company, and it is going 24/7. And it doesn't shut down for anything. It is always producing product. It is a very efficient machine. And at some point, if a transaction and sale is not made, there is going to be a backup. The longer a guy goes without sex, the more he needs it. The longer a woman goes without sex, often the less she needs it. Which is why we talk about frequency. Apostle Paul writes this. He says, the husband should fulfill his wife's sexual needs, and the wife should fulfill her husband's needs. So as a couple, you just have to decide, what does that look like for us? There's no right or wrong. It's just saying, hey, neither of us want to feel sexually starved, so what does that look like? And you might have to put some dates on the calendar. Right? If you're married and you've got little kids running around the home, I'd say plan to have sex or you won't. Life gets so chaotic. Now, if you're single, plan not to have sex or you will. The reality, right? So sex, right? We put it on the calendar. I mean, literally, right? I don't care what you write. You could say Sunday is fun day, right? Monday morning madness. 2 for Tuesday. Wow, wow, Wednesday. Right? You can put whatever you want. Throw down Thursday, Freaky Friday, Sexy Saturday. Just put it on the calendar, right? Here's bottom line. Do not deprive each other of sexual relations. So again, the frequency is up to you. What else do we talk about? Talk about what kind of you want to explore, how you want to be creative. And again, this is uncomfortable at times. But we can be uncomfortable. The third king of Israel, Solomon, says, let your wife be a fountain of blessing for you. Rejoice in the wife of your youth. She is a loving deer, a graceful doe. Let her breasts satisfy you always. Some of you women wonder, why does my husband run around the house trying to grab me all the time? He's trying to apply what he read in the scripture. He is a very spiritual man. Give God the glory for that. Now, seriously, talk about what you want to do, what you want to try. It's so interesting, right? We can be naked with each other, but we can't have emotional, mature conversations. Now, I'll just end with this, and we're going to be really brief in my answers. But I've been asked several questions over the years, and some of them are repeating questions. And they're not actually asked out of, oh, Dave, I just want a perverted answer, and I just want you to have to address this. They're actually asked because of how intense some of our upbringings were on this topic, and nobody ever talked to us, and nobody ever gave us the freedom and liberated us. So I'm just going to ask the question, and I'm going to answer it very, very quickly. I've been asked many questions on masturbation. Can I pleasure myself? Can I pleasure my spouse? Is that appropriate? And I'd say there's nothing in the Bible that discourages it, okay? Matter of fact, we read this in Ecclesiastes 9. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all of your might. Okay, I took that one out of context. That's about work. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done that. But the bottom line is, hey, if you're, especially if you're, God forgive me, please, just forgive me. If your spouse is sick a lot and physically can't have sex, that may be a great way to explore with each other, all right? And I'd say keep pouring out of it. Just keep your minds pure. Be exclusive with each other. Another question I get, how do I avoid sexual temptation when traveling? And I can't imagine how difficult that must be for those of you who travel regularly. But man, if your spouse would be open to giving you pictures, right? If your spouse would be open to maybe FaceTiming and having where you guys can be lone locked rooms, but you can be interacting with each other. I'll just leave it at that. But man, we have to learn to explore and to be open in these areas, to just be honoring to God in our sexuality. Is oral sex okay in marriage? You can, you should, and often. All right, number 4, are sex toys okay to bring into marriage? And the answer, and that's a question I get probably the most, what about sex toys? It feels like so wrong. And man, most women can't orgasm on their own. And so there often is a lot of benefit to bring in some toys that can help with that kind of stuff. I don't see there being anything wrong with it. Again, as long as you're not making the toy like over the husband or over the wife, and you're still honoring each other. But man, God gave women the clitoris. It has one purpose only, and that's for pleasure. And so God's not against this stuff, and we just need to be liberated and honor him in our heart, in our mind, in our soul, and in our body. Now, I would say this, if you ever do have an orgasm simultaneously, mark that date on the calendar, right? I mean, have a parade, make that a family holiday, and the whole works, because that is so freaking rare, and that's worth fireworks and the whole works, all right? Again, you can't make up in the bedroom what you lack in the relationship. So if your relationship is at a bad point, just remember this. And I'm saying this for those of you who say, Dave, this is great, we laugh, we have fun, but my relationship is not doing good. Key verse, love never gives up, never loses faith, is always hopeful, and endures through every circumstance. Just keep moving forward, one step at a time. And even in a talk like today, just take one thing and say, what's my next step? What is it, God? And if you say, that's overwhelming, I don't know what then just go back in this whole series. What's one step in this series that you can say, here's what I'm going to do to move towards health in my relationship? Sex isn't gross, and sex isn't God. Sex is a gift. Now, on Sunday evening at 8:30 p.m., we have Relationship Restart After Hours, Facebook Live. This week, we're going to do some more Q&A than we've been doing. And here's how that's going to work. We're actually going to put a number out there on Facebook Live. We won't do it now, but a number out there that you can text anonymously. Right? You can send a message to anonymously and ask questions, because I know when it comes to this topic, it's hard to just be right there on Facebook. Hey, Dave Nelson, ask. So we're going to put that out there, and we're going to have a good time on Sunday evening. So if you're a follower of Jesus, what's your next step? Next week, we're going to talk about what happy couples know. It's the end of our series. I hope that not only you show up, but that you bring someone with you. It's okay for your children to go back to their children should always be in their kids' rooms, right? But if you felt uncomfortable with your teenagers here, you shouldn't, because they could have got up here and taught us all something, right? But at the end of the day, next week, last week of the series, bring someone with you. We're gonna conclude this thing with a bang. Oh, I bet you we will. All right. Heavenly Father, give us now wisdom to know what to do with our sexuality, how to honor you with it, and the courage to do it. In Jesus' name, amen.